Is skateboarding poetry?
Oh, yeah, totally.
This is the first episode of Bullying Poets, a podcast asking poets why. I'm Joshua Bonzak. I'm a fiction and essay writer as well as the publisher of Long Day Press, a novella and chapbook press. I like poetry, but I don't always get it. I want to find out why it is and maybe come to appreciate poetry a little more by bullying some poets into telling me. Andrew Weatherhead was kind enough to be my first victim. When I asked him to send me his bio in the form of a haiku, he responded by saying, "I take a very liberal view of the haiku format, just a heads up." And then he sent me this. Andrew was born in Chicago, Illinois, and lives in Glen Falls, New York. So then, of course, I had to ask him about rules. His new book, FUDGE, was recently released through Publishing Genius and includes sections like 20 pandemic haiku, things the Photoshop instructor said and did, poem while on hold with NBA League Pass customer support, and other things that we talk about. And there's no way to transition this smoothly, so I'm just going to say here is my conversation with Andrew Weatherhead. What's poetry? Why are you doing this?
What is poetry? Doing this as in writing poetry?
Yeah, why write poetry?
um, okay, two different questions. What is poetry? I don't really know. I think it's where I've landed is a very personal spot, I feel like, where I see it, but it doesn't look like the poetry that everyone else sees or the poetry that gets taught to us, maybe. Although I've learned a lot that has affected that, so that's not entirely true. Um, it feels like a feeling um of like some kind of like inconsistency in the world, or like a glitch in the matrix kind of moment. Um uh that feels like poetry to me. Why do it? That's a good question. So let's see. I guess it kind of helps for me to think about it as like, why not do it?
Mm.
Um, and I've noticed when I don't do it, I don't feel good. It's become very compulsive. I almost can't help it. And it's like when I haven't written anything in a while, or like a lot of times things are just little lines that come to me. Um, they come to me when I haven't, like I can go search them out and have decent success that way, but if I don't write anything for a while, something will happen, or I'll see something, or some weird thing will occur, and I'll be like, there it is, and like I'll jot it down, and it's like I can't escape it, like it's hunting me or something.
Mm.
um and then why do it? I think another thing I just want to convey too is like the ultimate freedom in poetry with language. I think that's part of like maybe what it is and why I do it. Um, that it You can do anything with poetry. You're not stuck to really any rules at all, or expectations on the part of the reader. Uh, it is whatever you want it to be, and that's what the reader gets, um, which feels different from fiction or other types of writing, where there are some expectations, even though they can be bent really far. Um, that if you go too far, you start upsetting people, and they're like, "Well, that's not that." But no one will ever say that's not poetry. You know what I mean? Like
Huh.
it can be anything. So
Yes.
I think that's what I have to say about that.
So I love that point about rules, especially considering like you'd mentioned with haiku, where you don't necessarily keep the form. You take some liberties with it. There's the
Yeah,
section in here that is I believe it's like 20 pandemic haiku.
yeah.
And I started reading them, and then like quickly I was quite like, oh, this is not, the 5 syllable, 7 syllable, 5 syllable. It like instantly reminded me of Wayne's World when he's like,
Barth, that's a haiku. Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
it's like in no way, shape, or form is that a haiku.
yeah. Right. I've tried to scan that one too. It's been a while, but yeah, he just doesn't say a haiku. But when Wayne tells him it's a haiku,
It's like it's your basement, but
uh,
it's not your basement.
isn't that strange? Yeah. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
So with these like rules, like how is it that you can, claim it as that form where it like very much resembles, like if I were to see it, I would have no doubt that that's a haiku, but like going back and actually have to thinking about like, does it fit
Yeah,
these
um,
rules?
that's a good question. I don't know where I got this from, but I feel like I saw somewhere that like the traditional haiku form was never really based on a syllable count. Like that's kind of a Western sort of like grid we've put upon it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't know enough about that. I mean, I've read lots. I love ancient Chinese poetry and like the haiku masters of Basho and in particular. And I've read a lot of them. And I mean, they're always translated, of course. I don't know Chinese. Um, so I can't say whether the syllable counts line up, but that to me, I think I heard that and just went like ran with it and was like, oh, I don't have like I'll just make them 3 lines. Like as long as you're kind of close. I think I did one not in this book, but in another book that was like it was 2 lines, but there was a missing like a space like a double spaced haiku. So like it was just 2 lines essentially. And then it became fun to play with people's expectations about it. Like they think, we're taught at least in America, that it's a very rigid form of this 575 format. But then it's like just do like what can you do to mess with that? People are thinking it's going to be the thing we've all taught, and then if you kind of like just it becomes like an expectation to push against.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. It's good. I'm still trying to like be convinced, like why poetry, right? Um, so with your work, a lot of it is very much like condensed to a certain like space or time. Or at least a lot of the work in this book where there's, the pandemic haiku. So it takes place over the pandemic versus the things my Photoshop teacher said, where it takes place over the period of this class. And then even the like, while being on hold with NBA League Pass, it takes place over this way too long hold session. So what does that mean to you to condense this space and this time to like really have all those words within that small area of time and
Oh, that's a
space?
good question. I think it helps give context to the poem, or like a structure to it. So um I guess a question for you is, so like you write fiction or prose, is that right?
Yeah,
So like
primarily fiction.
was the concept that I'm like trying to convince you of like the merits of poetry like against prose?
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
even like, very commercially, where anytime someone's trying to like submit a poetry manuscript to Long Day Press, which I edit, I'm just like, I can't do anything with it. Like I don't know if this is good. I'll have students who will read poetry for like magazine submissions, and they're just like, I don't know. I'm like, well, do you like it?
Yeah.
And I want to figure out like what reasons can I, give them or give myself to be like, yeah, like
Oh, okay. I see. Well, it helps. All right, because like the putting a poem within like a setting like that builds in some like narrative and contextual framework that you would do in prose or fiction within the piece. But if you can just say like this took place while on hold with a customer service rep, or like this is the Photoshop class, like then I don't have to say in the opening, I don't have to establish that in the poem of being like, uh, I went to the Photoshop class, I signed up for it here, my company paid for it. It just puts you right into it if you have that going in. Or like there was another one, the first like poem, or I guess series in the book, takes place on like one day, and like you give the day, and so it's like puts you in the mindset of walking around a city like this is just kind of a random day, and not like without that clue, then you're like, well, these what's connecting these, where are we, like
Mhm.
what's going on? But then I can like omit those, the tedious parts of like where, when, who, and just get right to like the sort of meat of it.
Yeah, with that first section with the small poems, it like instantly sets up like here's all the context you need to know, knowing that it takes place on September 11th, 2016, where
Yeah.
it's already like such a loaded day. And then for it to be through this, there's hints of like what's going on at that time period where there was the congressman who's like, what's Aleppo?
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
And it,
I don't
you
even
know,
remember one.
right, but it being used as like the period for one of the poems like is instantly like of that time or that date right there. Like I remember
Yeah,
like yeah,
yeah,
sitting in a
yeah,
bar and like watching that on why ever the bar had like CNN on, and, like contextualizes it.
yeah.
Awesome. Um, I mean, same thing with like the kids I teach, where it's a little more like obscure because of just the context of it, but it like has all these like really interesting parts of like it also like sets the scene for like
Yeah, exactly.
teaching.
Right, right. That's a deep cut. That's funny you read that one. But like, yeah, exactly. Like now, because it's called The Kids I Teach, I don't have to tell you it's kids talking. Like they're, or like what's involved. It sets, and I can just say the like funny stuff that they said and did without painting a picture for you. You know what I mean? Like we've all had enough interactions with kids that to know like kind of what the ground rules are.
So what does that mean for your revision process if it is like in this condensed space? Like, do you have to, I mean, A, do you revise? And B, if you do you have to go back into that specific time and see if it was something that would
Oh,
fit there?
that's a good question. I revise a ton. Um, I know the work, my books are generally pretty short, so it might not seem like that, but like I really like sit with them for a long time. And it's not like going back into that mindset of like, it's like, what else can I pull into this? Of like, okay, I've set the ground rules, and like, like everything in that first section of the book, hollow points, like didn't actually occur on that day, but it was like similar enough of like another time I was in that same neighborhood, or like another time that I crossed the street, or like saw someone get hit by a car in that same area. Um, that I was like, it's like it's poetry. I can do whatever I want. So like it's not literally like a day in the life, but it was like that's there, and like, oh, I had this other thing over here. Like, what if I put that next to this? And like it ends up being kind of like a collage framework almost. And like saying like the kids I teach is another example of like, those were multiple teaching jobs across various cities and different kids, but you can just like kind of flatten it into one thing, to make it seem cohesive, but really I'm pulling from like way more than it might seem in the final product.
So is like theme and aesthetic. I know this is like a big question, but is theme and aesthetic more important than like a authenticity of time and space?
Yeah, totally. It's yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, and it's also like in the revision process, you look at it for so long that I forget what really like like let's say that first one, Hollow Points. So it's dated September 11th, 2016. I don't remember what exactly happened that day. And now it's been so conflated in my editing process of like, was that that day or was that another time? Or like, did I just make that up? Like, when did that guy say what's Aleppo? Like, it was around the same time, or like it might have been the same neighborhood that I had seen certain things. But yeah, it's more like an emotional truth, I guess.
So between your most recent book, previous to Fudge, $50,000, which is one extended poem.
Yeah.
What was the process like when putting this out, where it's like multiple sets of poems? Like, how was that, like, editing, like structuring process like for you?
Um, it was maybe it felt like a lot. Um, gosh, it like because it was over a year of like ordering and putting it together, which seems crazy to me now looking at it. It seems so obvious, like there's not that much in it. Like, why wasn't it this way from the beginning? But I think it just took such a meandering path in my mind of like, oh, what if this was the first one? Like, what is that? What trajectory does that set us on versus like what's or like where does it need a set piece here or like a little interlude poem or something. I think I knew I wanted to start with Hollow Points. I think that was like an early call. And then um like the yeah, and it was like getting from that one to like maybe the League Pass poem is like the other big one without it feeling like I was just dropping like big blocks of like poems on you. I don't know. Like it's like how do I put in some stuff so it doesn't feel like just like four or three long poems in a row and it feels more cohesive. Um, and then the last poem in the book called Last Poem was like written for to be the last poem of the book, where I was like, I know I need like the end of this or something. Which I'd never done that before, like written for a purpose in a collection kind of thing, but it it was like a challenge that was fun to do. And I think that it also like informed backwardly how I got to there. Like as I would edit in there, I was like, oh, what if I switch this around to lead us up to this point? Or I kind of, was trying to trace like an emotional arc throughout the whole book. Um,
Yeah, that's some interesting cartography, like
yeah, and
laying
like
that out.
with $50,000, that one was like like making sure the order of all those lines were right, and it was really kind of just ended up being a collage project for the last like year or so because it's just like I'm not writing anything. I'm just moving this over here and like this section is good. Like how do I get from this section to this section? Like what line could kind of bridge the gap? But this one felt like I had bigger blocks to work with, which was nice in terms of like keeping it easier to manage in my head, but harder to like work around because they were so fixed. Like um, there was less wiggle room.
Gotcha. Cool. Um, so like you skateboarders previously skateboarded, correct?
Mhm.
Is skateboarding poetry?
Oh yeah, totally. I was just it's so funny. I was just talking about this, and then with MD Wheatley, another writer, who skated, and he was on a podcast like a week later talking about, and they asked him like the same question, like what is skate, and then he was like, "Well, I was just talking to Andrew about this whole thing." Anyways, it's just coming up a lot. But I think, um, do you do you skate or did you skate?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't as much now because I
Yeah,
run marathons, so I'm like I can't mess up my ankle because it's a lot.
yeah,
But
yeah.
like it's one of those things I really miss and like used to do a lot. Like
Yeah, I've noticed that my legs are so imbalanced. Like I try to run, but my like left one, I would skate regular. Like the left one and the right one are just so off from skating. I have to
Hmm.
imagine. Um, I
Yeah,
didn't
I'm
do,
in PT for that right now because it's just like, oh, I've been
yeah,
pushing
yeah,
with
yeah.
this leg for so long.
Right. One's shorter than the other. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so okay, the original question. I think like the energy of skateboarding, and especially like a skate video, is like that's the goal I'm trying to get to a lot of times. And I think a lot about the way like my favorite skate parts are edited and the way like you would start with you start a certain way and like end with your best stuff and um the song matters and like the way to keep someone's interest is not well, I mean, depends on who your favorite skaters are, favorite skate parts are, but like just, if it's like just rail trick after rail trick after rail trick, that gets boring. But how do you mix it up so that you like when you do have like that big gnarly trick, it lands in within like a context. Um, so I like, and I remember being in my MFA program at the new school, and like there were bars in Brooklyn that we would hang out at that would like have skate videos on, like not even skate bars, but just like yeah, right would be playing or something. And I'd be like, watch, like, don't you see how like the trick is just like poetry? Like it's just like poem, poem, poem. Like that's how you put a poetry collection together. And I was like so adamant. I was like, how are you not seeing this? Like this is like, and they're just looking at me like I'm crazy. None of them skated, of course.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's always like made so much sense to me, and I like love watching skate videos as an excuse to like study the like the video craft of like that I can like steal from for poetry purely and just like an emotional and like energy and excitement standpoint. I've never really written about skateboarding. I don't know if I have that in me. I don't know what I would say, but I think it's just like the most obvious art form or something. Like you just can't look away.
It makes a lot of sense with like, what is expected of it versus like what are the rules where like there still are these boundaries, like you have to have your like killer ender, but like you even bring up the yeah right video where in the matter of an hour you have like invisible boards, you have Owen Wilson, you
Yes.
have like the Keenan Milton like art. It's just like there's no necessarily flow, but like something all together like makes it feel like cohesive
Yeah,
and
right.
cool.
Like the hijinks stuff plays a big part. Or
Mm-hmm.
I think about like Jerry Sue's part in Bag of Suck. Like his first like two or three tricks are just little like nose wheelies on that super steep bank. And you're like, they're not like, you know what I mean? You're just like, well, that's like the tone he's setting. Like he's like, and the song choice, and then like to switch it up to the like that Sonic Youth cover to end it. Like it just feels like such obvious poetry to me. You know what I mean? I don't know. I could like it's funny because like there's like three people who like know what I'm talking about, maybe. You know what I mean? Like but it's such a big deal to me.
Yeah. This is just like coming to me now, but like that's what I used to is make skate videos when I was, 13, 14, whatever, like in the middle of nowhere, rural Illinois. And like somehow then I was like, okay, I'm making this. I realized like this isn't a financially viable thing to do in rural Illinois. So like then I was like making music and then like started writing, like it all kind of like went through, but that was definitely like an entry point where I hold it in my head to be the same feeling of like skateboarding and like
Yes.
making, basically publishing work about skateboarding, like doing videos, even if that's just putting them on YouTube or MySpace or whatever, was like I am creating something and making something.
Yeah. Right. I think it's a thing that I've noticed. It's like uncanny how you gravitate to people like that. That or like the people in my MFA program who were never into skateboarding or like punk rock maybe. that they don't have like in like just ingrained in them of like I have to make something and I can do it. I don't need like permission, you know. It's like a very unique person that it just seems like that I either am gravitated to, or like I put off the right energy to gravitate, have them like come to me, or that like you can just tell when someone is skated, or you can tell when they haven't, I should say, or done anything like that, because it does put that creative like spark in you from a young age, where you're like, that's the right way to do it is like however you want to do it, and you can do it yourself, you know.
That was from my conversation with Andrew Weatherhead. His newest book, Fudge, is out now on Publishing Genius. We'll continue to update you on episodes through Instagram at Bullying Poets, and you can support this project by picking up books from Long Day Press. We just released a new edition of Christian Tabordo's We Go Liquid, a novel about a boy receiving spam emails from his dead mother. It was originally published in 2007, but due to a variety of reasons, went out of print within months and has been largely unavailable since. You can order it through us at longdaypress.com, or you can bully your local independent bookstore into ordering some copies. And if you're in New York, December 8th, Christian Tabordo will be reading along with other Long Day Press authors, Jessica Ann, author of Sex with My Family, and Bessie Flores Saldivar, author of Rain Revolutions. That will be at P&T Knitwear, Friday, December 8th at 7 p.m. All of our music today is from Kyle Francois and the Gold Dust, your new favorite Iowa country punk band. This has been Bullying Poets.